Good evening and welcome to the Opening the MBA Door to Success webinar. My name is Beth McAllister and I will be your technical producer this evening. The webinar this evening will be presented to you by Donna Bauman and Melissa Provo. And before we start the presentation, I just want to take a moment to make sure that everyone is ready and familiar with the GoToWebinar interface. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see your chat or your control panel. So if everybody can just take a quick second and type into your questions pane where you are listening to us from, that way we know that you know how to ask us questions this evening.
I see Columbus
Beautiful.
and Maryland, San Diego. Awesome.
Oh, a fellow Canadian on board. Fantastic. Welcome. Excellent. Thank you very much, ladies. So that is how you're going to communicate any questions that you have this evening to both of our presenters. Also during this evening, we'll be asking a couple of poll questions. So we ask you if you could please participate in those. That will really help our presenters customize this presentation to you. It's really important that you can stay attentive and interact as much as possible during the webinar as you can, because the quality of the experience obviously depends on your participation. So for the next hour, try to avoid any distractions by responding to emails or checking on social media. Take this hour to just enjoy this presentation for yourselves. If you do need to step away for a moment, don't close the window, as you'd be required to log back in if you want to rejoin the session. This is going to be recorded and will be available shortly on the CAPA website, and we will share that link with our participants as soon as we know exactly where it will be. So now I'm going to turn the virtual mic over to Melissa to start our presentation.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. Don and I wanted to do this presentation. We worked together and realized that we were both CAPAs, and we work with a company called Stratus, where we help people who are looking to do an MBA go through the application process. We work with lots of women and thought that it might be a great opportunity to help some people or answer some questions out there about opening the door to an MBA. So just a little, first we'll start with a little background on ourselves and then jump into the presentation. So I'm a Beta Lambda alum from many, many years ago, University of Illinois, and studied engineering, did some consulting post undergrad, then in the first dot-com boom, hopped out of that and did supply chain, and then went back to business school. I spent 7 years at Home Depot in their strategy group. And through that entire time, I was an alumni interviewer for Haas, which is where I went to business school. And during that time, I found that often I had an interviewee that had a little nugget that I was trying to get to, and I was trying to help them, get to their answer. And because of that, in wanting to help people through the process, I joined Stratus so that I could kind of take a step back and help people figure out their own strategy and figure out the right schools and how they're going to approach the process. So I'll hand it over to Donna to introduce herself.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, so it's fun to be talking to fellow CAPAs and fellow friends of CAPAs who are with us tonight. The thing that I like about what I do is it kind of combines so many different pieces of my life and prior experience. So I actually graduated, did my undergrad from UNC Kenan-Flagler. Then I worked in New York City. After graduation, I worked for a bank for a little while, and then I worked in a lot of consumer packaged goods national advertising. So I worked on Maxwell House Coffee and Corningware. Then went to Kellogg, got my MBA, and then spent many years after that actually back at UNC Kenan-Flagler, first in the undergraduate program, then 15 years in MBA admissions. So I come to this admissions role as both a counselor and also someone who has been on the other side and has made admissions decisions. But now when I have clients, I'm sort of bringing in also my advertising and communications background, where instead of a product, the product is really anybody who's the candidate, the applicant. So we're really trying to help people tell their most compelling stories and be able to, make a good impression on the admissions committee. So I do that. It's really very rewarding. It's an honor to get to know people's stories. And as far as my Kappa connection, I am a Epsilon Gamma, Kappa Kappa Gamma, and UNC Chapel Hill. So, and I am actually still in Chapel Hill. So, did not go, went to other places, but I'm back home and really enjoy it. Let me also just tell you a little bit about Stratus and even what admissions counseling is, because honestly, when I was going to business school, it didn't exist. It didn't exist. But I guess the best way to maybe explain what admissions counseling is, and people may be more familiar with this on the undergraduate side because it is, I think, a growing thing, but it's kind of like a personal trainer, if you will, or personal coach. You know, I think some people could lose weight on their own, but some people just find that having someone to help keep them accountable and train them makes the process, you know, for us, we hope it saves our clients time, helps them clarify goals, selects programs. We really, you know, because we really, all of our counselors have an MBA from a top program and are working through many iterations of different school application, you know, years of doing this and seeing different kinds of people. We have a good sense of helping people find best fit programs and maybe discover programs that they didn't know exist, and maybe know where might be the best place to look if their goal is, for example, getting scholarships or things like that. So that's a little bit about admissions counseling. Stratus is one of the firms, that's the firm that Melissa and I work with. And, you know, again, all of our counselors have MBAs from top programs, and we are very collaborative in working together to have, because it's not a science admissions, it's more of an art. So we collaborate. And so when you work with us, you work with not just one counselor, but there are multiple touch points where you might have 4 or 5 different counselors that will weigh in on things. And then the other thing that's kind of nice about Stratus, if that's of all interest to you, is just that for us, we have this 4-school guarantee. So when we have clients that work with us on 4 or more schools, in the rare situation where maybe they're not accepted into their top programs that first year, we will work with them again for free. So that's just a little bit about, again, Stratus and admissions counseling. And it gives Melissa and I really, I think, a very good framework to be able to help you kind of think about how can you evaluate MBA programs, think about different ways rather than just looking at sort of the rankings that everyone looks at, but to go a little bit deeper. So we're calling this sort of the 6 C's for MBA programs, and it's a framework, and I'm going to let Melissa introduce a little bit more about what that is, and then we're going to kind of walk through each one in a little bit more detail.
Perfect. Thanks, Donna. And before we jump into that, I thought I'd throw out another poll question just for us to get a feel as to where you might be in the process. So if we could do the poll, when do you expect to start an MBA program?
For sure. There you go.
And you could give us an idea. Okay, we've got so 2/3 not sure and 1/3 looking to start in this next year. Couple coming in at 2020. So a lot of you out there still trying to decide, which is great to hear, so that we can tailor to that. And then some of you that are probably in the process if you are applying for 2019. Great, thank you. So we're going to run through what we call our 6 C's for MBA programs. And this is really, as Donna mentioned, a way to think through and evaluate schools, what is your fit for schools, and how you can identify and evaluate kind of your fit and compare and contrast different programs. So we're going to talk about competitiveness, and that's kind of your competitiveness with kind of the data and the numbers behind you at a program, the connections that you can make with a program, what is the curriculum at each specific program, you know, how do you like to learn, and what, how does each program teach, the clubs that you can join, you know, each MBA or getting an MBA, you learn as much outside of the classroom as you do in the classroom. And so clubs are a very large part of the experience, clubs, conferences, things like that. Community and culture, you know, each school has its own flavor. there is no good or bad. It's really what you're looking for, and you taking a step back to realize what you're looking for can really be helpful when you're going to look for programs and understanding the way that you want to learn. And then cost, which is obviously an important piece as well. And we'll dig into some of the different factors there. So why don't we go into competitiveness?
Sure.
Donna, I'm going to start with that.
Yeah, I'm going to start with that. And before we even get into your personal competitiveness, which I have on the screen here, I kind of want to step back and just talk a little bit about some trends in MBA admissions, just to give you a sense. So the latest research from the Graduate Management Admissions Council, GMAT, talks about, so overall MBA program applications have fallen for the third consecutive year for what they report. However, in the top 25 programs, only 6 of them have lower applications. So I think what's happening in the market right now for MBAs is that it's becoming more competitive than ever to get into sort of a top 25 program. And then there's almost like chia pets. There's so many programs for MBAs, online programs, and this kind of program and that kind of program. So there's tons of proliferation. There's also a lot of disruption happening in this market in the sense that there's all kinds of new master's programs options and all kinds of things. But it really, in terms of the top programs, it's more competitive than ever. Some schools that are seeing some double-digit rises recently, like Booth and Carnegie Mellon, had applications in the last year that was reported, 2016, 2017, 13%, Yale up 12%, Columbia almost up 12%. So that's just good to keep in mind, that it's harder than ever. In terms of why there might be overall fewer, I think that certainly when the economy is doing well, you find that people, don't want to leave their jobs. Certainly the rising cost of MBA programs is something that people are looking at. And then in terms of international students, there's been kind of a drop, as you might expect, just from a lot of the political things going on in the United States. So you're seeing more international candidates sort of maybe shift demand away from U.S. programs, and so that's another thing. And then I touched on this too. There's sort of more shorter master's programs that are and online programs that are sort of catching people's attention, particularly in like data analytics. But one good news that I want to share in terms of competitiveness is, especially for this audience, it has probably never been a better time to be a woman and be applying to business school. Actually, in 2013, it looks like women were 37% of the total, and last year they were 42% of the total applications. And Kellogg this year actually reported a class of 46% women. So there's really never been a better time. Business schools are hungry for women, so that's the good news. And I think there's never been more scholarship opportunities and just more resources for women. That's good to keep in mind. And then as we get into sort of how do you look at your own competitiveness, I think of it as sort of 3 legs of a stool, if you will. There's lots of things that go into the MBA admissions decision, but if you were going to pull out 3 that you could think about, certainly how you do on the standardized test scores. So the GMAT, the GRE, most people take the GMAT, although it's increasingly becoming a trend that some people take the GRE instead. The TOEFL that I mentioned here is really, which probably doesn't apply to, it's unlikely, but if you did not do your undergraduate degree in English and you're not a U.S. citizen, then you would have to take the TOEFL. But that GMAT, GRE, that score is looked at the GPA from your undergraduate institution, and it's sort of the quality. So admissions people look at your transcript and look at sort of the rigor of what you've taken. They probably look a little bit more carefully at the quantitative courses. So if you've not taken calculus or microeconomics or statistics or financial accounting, and especially for those of you that are a couple years out, that would be probably a big tip I would give you, is that it wouldn't be a bad thing to take a course or 2 in those areas so that you're showing that you have sort of quantitative prowess and the ability to do the curriculum of an MBA program. And then the third thing, which is also very important, is work experience. And in a nutshell, the things that I looked for when I was on the admission side, and certainly the things we coach our clients to look at, is showing impact, showing that you've done something. So you're not just trying to describe what the job was, but you're showing how you did it, whether you increased sales or decreased cost or improved gross margins, something that says that you made a difference in the work that you did. Business schools like to see that you're promotable, so that you have maybe progressed, you've been promoted. So if you're in a job right now and you have the opportunity to potentially stay in it long enough to get promoted, and you're looking at that, 1 to 5 year MBA horizon, it would be good to maybe hold on and try to get promoted before you make a switch. And then some of the things that obviously that mattered in college certainly mattered in and was something that you got a lot of training from Kappa in would be, just leadership development and community impact. So those things matter. Increasingly sort of having cross-cultural, cross-functional experience in your work. I would say that a just real quick rule of thumb is it is very hard, I think, to get into a program if you are under the bar on all three of these. It really helps if you are at least, 2 out of 3, you're maybe above the bar. And what you can do when you're looking any program, you can look at the MBA program, go into the class profile that they will put on their website, and you can see kind of a median or an average test scores, GPA, number of years of work experience. And that is, again, that's not the only thing. And we've certainly seen lots of clients who defy the odds, but that is certainly something that can give you a sense when you're trying to say, what are my chances at a place? And now we're going to give you kind of a little, we kind of put in some examples, and these are real clients that we have. They're not their real pictures because there's no need, we, sort of confidentiality there, but these are quotes from clients, and this is some case studies that I think maybe could help you. So I'm going to talk about this client that I had a couple years ago who actually just finished at Columbia, and she had a somewhat average, I think in terms of what Columbia's profile was, she was perhaps a little bit below the bar there. But here's a case where she used sort of competitiveness to her advantage. She had applied to Columbia, and actually she did it very late in the process. And so we were rushing to get her into the deadline for the early decision. But she did not really need an internship because she was working, she actually had a business that she was starting on the side, and she wanted her MBA to be able to grow that business. So in that case, she had a couple things where Columbia has this J term where you can start in January. It's not necessarily, at least officially, easier to get in per se, but I would say there's maybe a certain kind of cohort tends to attract international students, and it also tends to, it's right for people who don't necessarily absolutely need an internship. And so she applied through the J term, and I think that in doing that, she kind of gave herself a better chance to defy the odds and defy the stats, and she was successful there. And, she even was able to do an internship while she was in the program, just not in the summer, but during the school year. So I think that's an example of where, looking at yourself and your profile, and also trying to maybe figure out what might be the right fit program to sort of increase your odds. So that's an example there. And I think Melissa's got a different example of competitiveness that she's going to share.
Thanks, Donna. So I had a client. She's actually just exchanged emails with her today. She'll be starting at Duke, or I think in this next week she'll be down there. She came to us on her kind of second round of application. She wasn't successful in her first round, so she came to work with us in her second round. And in reviewing her application from before, she had solid grades from undergrad. She was had some great work experience, actually. So the average work experience of an applicant to business schools, or the middle 80%, is about 3 to 8 years, and she was on the 6 to 7, so a little bit on the higher end. But her GMAT score was lower than what she felt really reflected her skills. So she had a 660 on the GMAT. And she actually had studied engineering and had a pretty technical role. And so what in reviewing her prior applications and in kind of talking her strategy going forward in this past year, we really worked to accentuate her work experience. And one of the things that didn't come out as loudly as it could have was her global work experience. So she actually was from Jordan, but working in the US, and had done a lot of work, supply chain work across the world. And so we really made sure that came out. Another piece that I think was kind of instrumental in her leveraging her strengths was for Duke, there is what's called an early action round that allows you to apply with kind of a binding agreement. So if you're accepted, you're saying that you will go to Duke. What that does for Duke is, so schools, to put yourself on the other side, MBA programs are measured on certain data points in certain rankings, and yield is one of the measurements that they are measured on. And so with an early action round, they have a higher they know that these people are going to come to the program, so it increases their yield. So she came to us probably in late July, early August, thinking to do round 2 because she was a very organized person and wanted to get going. And we pushed her to get into early action because with the low GMAT, again, getting in earlier, she also did a proactive interview, and we'll talk about connections in a little bit. But all these things kind of built up to gaining her acceptance at Duke, which was great. So next, we're going to move on to connections, as I just alluded to. One thing when you are, again, one of the 6 things, when you're looking at schools, connections with both admissions and students and alumni are very important. I think of kind of from the school perspective, there's kind of 2 different levels of connections. You can make formal connections with admissions and informal connections with students and alumni. For the more informal connections, some of these can be facilitated by admissions, but you can also reach out to students on your own. Part of the reason that you want to make these connections and reach out to students is really to understand the culture, and the best way to understand the culture of a school is to get to know people that are going through or have gone through that program. Many schools were just kind of coming through the summer, but for those of you that are not quite sure when you're going back and are thinking for the future, in major metropolitan areas, often there are interns from every school that are diligently working in internships through the summer, and often they'll be open for grabbing a coffee or talking more about their program. This is a great way to get information further than just what's on the website. So, anyone can go on the website and read what's on the website, but if you are looking at, say, switching into finance or consulting, you could reach out to a student who's in the consulting club or in the finance club and really understand what's going on within that club at each program. And that way, through your essays as well as in your interviews, you can show that you have that knowledge and really show that you've done the work to get to know a specific program. From a formal connections at admissions, there's lots of different ways that you can do that. Visiting the school, I always recommend when it's possible, and it isn't always, obviously, visiting a school. Talking to students and alumni is the second best way to get to know a school, but sitting in a class and watching people interact and seeing how the professors and students interact really give you that best feel. Throughout the year, schools will visit, again, major metropolitan areas around the country and around the world, actually. So going to an info session, there are webinars, web chats. When you apply to a school, you really don't want that to be the first time that a school is hearing your name. So you want to, at some point through that process, make sure you've touched base with someone along the way. The other one is industry leaders. So, there are, especially for those of you who may be considering switching careers, another way to build connections that can then benefit you in selling your story on why switching is the right thing for you to do is making connections with industry leaders who are in the industry that you want to go to. So if you're in, you've been doing consulting, but you want to come out in brand management, making connections with people in the industry that you're looking for. So with brand managers can really help you from that standpoint. And if you're looking to go into a smaller or say an international field, that can be really beneficial to you in the post job recruitment process, because each school will have their standard companies that come in and recruit, but there are many other people who get jobs outside of that formal recruiting process, and a lot of those connections can be made throughout the program, but also early on, so that you can show that you have made connections into where you want to move to. So I had a client who I think embodied this connection really well. She is British and Vietnamese, but went to school here in the US. She had a strong GPA and kind of an average GMAT, kind of high 600s. She really wanted to work in Vietnam long term. She was based in Vietnam when she was applying. She wanted to come either to the UK or to the US for business school and then go back to Vietnam. And so as an applicant, we thought it was really important for her to make those industry connections that I was talking about. She was in education and wanted to really do more policy from an education standpoint. And so she spent her time while she was doing applications. Again, a lot of this was searching out for herself what her career plan and career goals were. She made connections continued to make connections within Vietnam, so that she could say in her application that she had already identified companies that she could do projects with, and that she would potentially be interested in being employed with post business school, really to show that she had thought out her plan and her trajectory. And I'm excited to say that she will be starting Stanford this fall. And again, I really think the connections that she made really made her application a very strong one. So I'm going to pass it on to Donna, who's going to talk a little bit more about curriculum.
Okay, great. Yeah, so curriculum, it's very important to really think about how you like to learn and what kind of, what's your learning style. So for example, in business school, the teaching methodology, you may have heard of the case method, and to some degree, a lot of, all schools have some case methods, but there are certain schools like Harvard, Darden, in Canada, actually Ivy, which is the University of Western Ontario, they're all known for being very strong in the case teaching method. So it really would make sense for you to sit in on a class like that and really sit in on, if you can, most schools will let you do a visit, and attending a class is part of that, just to get a feel of what, if that's a learning style there that suits you. In terms of core curriculum, this is also something that I don't think people necessarily really think about, that there is a huge amount of variety in terms of what a core curriculum is. Let me give you like University of Chicago Booth, there is one required class on leadership. So if you are someone that was kind of thinking, I'm not really sure what I want to do with my MBA, and I just want to go through this, lockstep, very structured core, and then, see what I like, and then do a little bit more once I then use that to choose my electives. Going somewhere like Booth, where there's only one required course, might not actually be a good fit for you, because you're going to have to really know a little bit more about, how to drive the ship early on. So if that's important to you, certainly Harvard has a very, the cohort sections are very close. Ross is a program that has very structured first year core curriculum. So it's important to think about this and ask yourself those kinds of questions, to think about where you learn best. The other thing is sometimes looking at the electives in particular can make a lot of sense. For example, I happen to, know UNC Kenan-Flagler pretty well from having worked there and being so close. They have an awesome real estate program. They have over 10 electives there. They have a center specifically dedicated to real estate. So, while maybe the rankings for UNC Kenan-Flagler aren't going to be as high as a top 10 program, if you want to do real estate, that should definitely be a program that you look at. So it helps to kind of, again, look in specific areas to see what a school might be able to offer. You don't want to go to a school and find out they have one elective in real estate if that's something that's really important to you. Same thing on sort of concentrations majors. There are some schools, for example, NYU has like a specialization in fintech. That seems to be a big area of interest. Interestingly enough, when Melissa and I were going to business school, probably not everybody, but certainly investment banking was highly sought after. And it's not that it's gone away, but I find that there's just a lot more interested in fintech now, or private equity, or some other areas. But anyway, if you were interested in fintech, Wharton has an active fintech club. So that's something to think about. If you have special interest in healthcare, Fuqua, Wharton, and if you think about it, most likely any city that is really known as a strong healthcare city. So like Boston, certainly known for that. Actually, the Research Triangle Park, so Durham and Chapel Hill, lots of healthcare centers. So you really should be kind of looking into that. And some programs, for example, Kellogg, they offer a lot of pathways. So the data analytics or social impact, and you can actually look on their website. That actually can help you almost map out, okay, well, if I'm interested in data analytics, here might be some of the clubs that would make sense for me, or here might be some of the, again, classes, resources, centers. So really look at that. And then experiential learning, almost every MBA program has experiential learning of some sort, but certainly I think it's worth looking at each, the programs and sort of with that lens. And there certainly are some programs that have been doing it a long time and have really rather well-developed offerings there. Ross and Tuck sort of come to mind there. Ross pioneered this MAP program 25 years ago, and they basically, when you're a first-year student, the last 7 weeks of your first year, you're actually working on a consulting project. So it's really, again, that can, especially if you're a career changer, experiential learning is very important to make sure that you get some relevant experience while you're in the MBA. And again, this is so much more valuable to kind of look at it at this more granular level than just going to some kind of, magazine rankings and taking someone else's word for what's the best programs for you. Example I wanted to share with you on sort of using the curriculum and how that can guide your selection process is I had a client who was interested in fintech and realized and really narrowed down some of the schools they were looking at to NYU, Wharton, Booth. All of those schools really took an early lead, I think, in terms of offering more electives and active clubs and have some leading professors. Wharton does a podcast on fintech. So, and this particular client is now, she's at a fintech company and is at Booth and we're getting ready to start the second year. So again, it's important to think about looking at that granular level, what's really important to you, and then being able to, do some research and do your own due diligence. Okay, in terms of the next one that we're going to talk about is clubs, and Melissa, I'm going to turn that back to you.
Great, thanks. And before we jump into this, I thought maybe we'd do another question. So it'll help educate how we talk about clubs a little bit. And what type of an MBA program are you considering? And I know some of you said you're still trying to figure this out, but are you looking for full-time, part-time, executive, online? So we've got about half full-time and about a quarter part-time and about a quarter online. All right, that's great. Thanks for that, that information. So that will help kind of guide how we talk about clubs. So for kind of full-time and part-time, this clubs piece is probably a little bit more appropriate. is, Donna talked about experiential learning. And, obviously the curriculum that you're learning in a program is very important. In addition, the learning that you're able to do outside of the classroom is equally as important. It allows you to test your skills that you're learning in the classroom and kind of practice them real time. Specifically in a part-time program, I like to talk to my clients about how you can learn something in the day or at night, not in the day, obviously, but you learn something one week and turn around the next week and you're applying it in class. So then the following week are applying it at work, and then you're coming back that next week and you can actually discuss it in class again. So, you really get the experience, that experiential learning piece. So clubs are another way to experience learning and practice with learning. So, professional clubs are one way that you can think about this is, if you're interested in finance or in investing, is there a finance club? Social entrepreneurship. There tend to be clubs aligned with a lot of the professional industries, and you'll find schools, as Donna was talking about, real estate being strong at Keenan Flagler. It's also very strong at Haas, and so you see that there's lots of clubs and activities around real estate. Social entrepreneurship is another one that there's clubs around. Identity and interest groups. So do you have a specific interest? Do you play a sport? These are great ways to get to know other people in your class, and arguably people that you might not be taking classes with. So to get to know someone on the soccer field, you may get to know someone from a different industry that you might not necessarily be taking electives with. So it's a great way to practice your leadership skills and get to know other people. Conferences and seminars and speaker series. This is a great way. We were talking about industry connections earlier and how they can help in the application process. They're also very valuable in your recruiting process when you're looking for your internship and your job post MBA. And often, their schools will have a conference in. Here in New York, Columbia and NYU do a retail conference, and they also do a media and entertainment conference. So if either of those industries are something that's interesting to you, you could offer to put together a panel of what's the leading technology in media. For example, and it allows you to be the person that's reaching out to the industry leaders to talk them into coming to be on the panel. You develop those connections, and those can be very valuable, both for working on projects within your classes, but also in finding internships and in jobs post MBA. Case competitions. So the schools will run different case competitions, sometimes in line with an industry, sometimes just to give students practice on going through kind of a bid type process. Student run portfolios. So impact investing is something, Donna was talking about fintech. I also think impact investing is an industry that is growing significantly. And for example, Haas has a fund that is actually run by students. So each year there's a group of students that apply to be kind of the managing directors of the fund, and they're actually making the decisions about what's invested in based on kind of their goals and the triple bottom line that they're looking for. Career tracks. So most programs, place people outside of just their region. So if you're in Chicago at Kellogg, often there'll be a career track out to San Francisco. So if San Francisco is where you want to end up long term, then leading that track and contacting companies in that region is a great way to make connections. Likewise, going into New York, there are great ways that you can make connections throughout your business school experience. So I just wanted to talk about one of my clients that I thought did a great job of leveraging clubs to actually make connections at school. So she studied supply chain management and was in biotech project management, but she really wanted to move into healthcare. And so as she was applying to schools, she really spent her time reaching out to healthcare clubs at each of the schools that she was interested in. She found that it was a great way to make a common connection because she was really trying to evaluate each of the different schools and what type of healthcare experience. Since she had a little bit in biotech, but not the full healthcare background, she was really looking for a program that she would be able to gain both the business skills, but also insight into healthcare. And she found that there are a number of programs that actually offered a dual degree, so an MPH and an MBA, and was so she really made those connections and was able to keep up with people. And I think that's, as you're making connections, keep making it a genuine connection, something that you can continue a conversation about, can be very helpful. So, being healthcare where she wanted to be and she was very passionate about, it was a more genuine connection for her to be able to maintain throughout the application process and ping people when she had questions and different things about that program. So she actually spent her summer at Genentech in San Francisco and is hoping to join a management program there post MBA, which is great. So I'm going to turn it back over to Donna, who's going to talk a little bit about community and culture.
Great. So, excuse me, this is one that maybe as Kappas, you can understand how important, different stories, there's a different culture at different ones. And it really, it might be some of the same activities that are going on, but it's through a lens that just feels like home and feels more comfortable. And certainly a great way to do that is to actually go visit. I mean, I think that's the very best way is to just sort of get on the campus, but thinking about, for example, location. If you know, and I think I'm, some people just don't like cold weather. I actually don't like cold weather, and I went to Kellogg, so I have to say, I was never so cold while I was there because my North Carolina temperature range is just so different. But nevertheless, let's say you're in a startup or you need to be near an airport a lot. If you're then going to somewhere like Cornell where maybe you're going to get snowed in and maybe it's a little bit harder to get in and out, maybe that's something you need to think about. The program size is also something that you have to think about. And actually, it sounds like most people here are kind of leaning towards the full-time, but there are all these different, there's full-time, there's part-time, there's online, there's executive MBA programs. And certainly think about, for those of you, we didn't launch the poll that said how many years, I think, of work experience that you have. But once you start to get to, say, 8+, 10+ years of work experience, you may find that the cohort, of having an average work experience of, people with 5 to 6 years of work experience, maybe you're going to feel more comfortable actually in an executive MBA program. And certainly there are a couple niche kind of opportunities where maybe you have, 10+ years of work experience, but you really want to do a immersive full-time kind of program. Stanford has an MSX program for experienced professionals. MIT has a Sloan Fellows program. So there are some unique MBA programs that you would have a cohort, with the same amount of work experience, and maybe a slightly different format, might be just a year long instead of 2 years. But it's really important to think about, first of all, what program makes sense. And then the class size also really can make a difference. And I'm going to give you kind of a range. Probably one of the smaller MBA programs with just over 100 people is University of Washington, Foster's MBA program on the West Coast. And contrast that with somewhere like Harvard Business School, where there's 935 people in a class. And there are MBA programs, from everywhere in between. But, knowing, like, if you went to a really small, private liberal arts college and you know that you thrive in that smaller environment, then, maybe a Wharton and our Harvard is not going to be a great fit for you. Certainly, I think going to visit but thinking about that, it can really help you find somewhere that you're going to feel at home and thrive. let's see, in terms of, I guess in terms of, the best example I want to give you in terms of culture too is I've been visiting a lot of MBA programs. I'm part of Stratus is a member of AGAC, which is the Association of International Graduate Admissions Counselors, and I've attended a lot of their conferences over the past couple of years and visit schools. And so this past summer, as part of that conference, I visited Michigan Ross, I visited Booth, I visited Kellogg, and Rotman, actually in Toronto. And so, for example, when we visited Michigan Ross, when we were done with we spent some time with the admissions people. At the end of it, their prize for us, which was very cool, they took us to the Michigan football stadium, and we got a special tour inside the locker room of the football team, and got into the building, and it was really fun. But you get a sense, okay, if I go to Michigan, like, football is still going to matter. Like, I don't think you can be on Michigan's campus and not think about sports, and it's part of the culture, and it's part of that. And that could be, a great thing or not a great thing, depending on your personality. Contrast that when we visited Booth, there was not, I didn't know football. They showed us the wall with Nobel Prize winners. And they told us that they had the third largest modern art collection in the city of Chicago. Just a very, very different kind of feel. And again, it's not really like good or bad, but it's really important to kind of think about where you're going to fit. And another example from visiting the year before, when we went to Haas, they have something called the Story Salon, where classmates really share very personal experiences about, challenges they face, things they could learn from their classmates. When I was there, and I liked it a lot, but it almost kind of felt a little bit like this sort of therapy session. And I could see that there might be some people who just wouldn't be comfortable in that environment. And contrast that when we went to go visit Stanford. And again, it's not to say that there's not lots of collaboration at Stanford, but I didn't get the feeling like it was just different. It didn't feel like that. So I can't stress enough how important it is to go visit and talk to people and really sort of find where you think it's the best fit and environment for you to learn. I mentioned jeans and khakis here because, if you go to Harvard, Darden, you're probably going to see more khakis. You go to somewhere like MIT or Booth, you're probably going to see more jeans and t-shirts. So just kind of knowing a little bit about where you feel most at home, I think it really, you want to put yourself in a place where you're going to enjoy, the thing too. Business school for the most part is 2 years. Sometimes there's 1-year programs, and sometimes there's, in some cases they go a little longer. Kellogg actually has a MMM program where people go and get a joint degree with the McCormick School of Engineering, and they actually come in the summer before and do some specific programming before they even start. So sometimes programs can be a little bit longer. But anyway, you're going to be there a long time, and you really want to, make sure that you're happy and that you're not miserable, because this is a long time and a lot of money, and so it pays to do that research. And a quick example here, just former client who's just getting ready to start at Tuck, and she was someone who had. I think her older brother visited Dartmouth, and she had fond memories of visiting Tuck as a child when it was several years older brother. So I think she just knew that there was sort of it felt like home. She also knew a lot about the residential culture. You can imagine Tuck is pretty close knit, group. It's not necessarily in a big city, so people get to know each other, and I think they have a really strong residential community. And so she got into some higher ranked schools, and even had some really generous offers financially to go and get more money at other schools. But she just knew that Tuck was the right fit for her. So she, I think, made that decision where, maybe on paper somebody else would have made a different decision. But I think it's really important. Again, there's no right decision, and you're not living your life to be in some rankings book, but you want to find the right, and Tuck, by all means, is actually an awesome school. But just kind of realize that you really want to find the place that's right for you. And I think Melissa has another quick example there before we go into kind of our last see.
Yes, so quick example, so that we have some time at the end for questions is, I have a couple clients and that came to me looking for full-time programs. And they both had about 10 years of experience, and in their profile, they had a very hard time with the GMAT. And so, they were looking for top-ranked programs, but the GMAT was definitely going to be a concern for them. Also, in visiting the programs and really understand the culture and who would be in their class for the full-time program, with 10 years of experience, they started looking at executive programs so that they could have a cohort of individuals that were about the same from a management level as they were. And I have to say that, having gone through the process and done the research, they were very interested and excited about the opportunity of the executive programs. They found those programs very engaging and very easy to reach out to. Executive programs, and I would say this about part-time programs as well, tend to really be willing to sit down and talk with you and understand whether you are a right fit for the school almost before the application process, which is very different than full-time programs. They just get too many applications to be able to do that. So I'm excited to say that one of those two is finishing up at Booth, and the other is starting at Kellogg, which were two of their excited top programs they were looking at. So let's move on to cost. This is a factor that obviously everyone is thinking about. A couple different things to think about in how you can kind of interpret the cost. Is your cost of living. So if you're looking at schools in a big city, New York, Washington, D.C., NYU, Columbia, Georgetown, it's going to be a high cost of living versus a smaller city or suburb. Northwestern and Indiana, you're going to be able to find a better cost of living. Cornell, Dartmouth, Donna was just talking about Tuck. Those are smaller towns, and so the cost of living is going to be a little bit more easier to handle compared to a big city. Understanding the different partner fellowships that are out there. There's the Forte Foundation that specifically is looking to launch women into successful careers. So that's definitely one that all of you should look into. They offer both fellowships as well as scholarships for business school. The consortium is a group that is looking to enhance diversity and inclusion and striving to reduce the underrepresentation of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans. And the Yellow Ribbon does fellowships for those who have spent time in the military. So definitely things that you could take a look at, as well as targeted scholarships. So each school will give out a certain number of scholarships. Different schools have different endowments that they're able to give out, but that's generally a part of the application process. There are a few schools that have a separate application process. Haas being one of them. They do all of their scholarships on a January schedule, no matter. So you need to apply within the first two rounds to be able to apply for a scholarship. But most schools will take your application as an application for a scholarship. So just a quick example about that is I had a client who was, she was looking to get into consulting. She applied across multiple programs and actually got a scholarship at Ross, but was most interested in going to Duke, was accepted to Duke, and was able to negotiate a Forte Fellowship, which didn't exactly give her funding, but through the fellowship, it really has given her some industry connections and ways that are really helping her to advance her career. So with that, I want to pass it back over to Donna.
Great. Yeah, and I'll try to do this part quickly because I do want to hope we have a couple minutes for questions. In terms of if you want to, how could we help you? It's funny, sometimes, again, it's a complicated process. All the different, so much to know about different schools, so much to know about, how to find the right place so you spend your time on the right things. So certainly we do that and help people. If you would like to know more, you can contact us for a free 30-minute consultation. And that is the website for that, the stratusadmissions.com/webinar. We kind of have a couple of fun opportunities for those of you on the webinar tonight. If you do schedule a consultation by the end of this week, so by the 17th, you can save up to $1,000 on a comprehensive package, should you decide to do that. So that would be at stratusadmissions.com/webinar. And then the other thing that we're going to do, and we'll notify you afterwards, when you signed up for this webinar tonight, you were asked if you'd like to be entered into a contest where we're going to give away 2 free hours of resume support. We didn't really talk about MBA resumes, but that certainly is a key part of the application process, and Melissa and I do that all the time. So we would be glad to spend an hour with 2 of you and you'll get notified to do that. So that's really kind of a little bit about, that's all. Thank you so much for that's about Stratus. But if there's any quick questions, Melissa, did you see anything that came up that was sort of, seems like we could maybe address it real quickly?
Sorry, the bars can't, yeah, there we go. Sorry, they were scrolling and I didn't see it. So someone asked if most of our clients were full-time students, and I'd say we have a mix of full-time, part-time, and executive. I don't know if we've had as many online people looking for online, but we've definitely kind of balanced across the other 3. I don't know if you have any comments on that one, Donna.
Yeah, I think certainly I said there's maybe growing interest, and I actually have a client I may be working with on an online program actually this coming year. So I think there is somewhat some interest there, and I think online is certainly a growing segment. In most cases, the applications are rather similar for all the programs, so certainly it can be, it can still be useful.
So then someone gave a little background on themselves, and they have a higher than average years of experience and are concerned that a 2-year program is that they're too old for a 2-year program, and they're looking at jobs that are saying that that an MBA is preferred or required. And so she's wondering if there's a benefit to an executive MBA. And I would have to say, I think if you are looking to move into these positions that an MBA is required, then I think an executive program, there's a definite benefit for you. And with your years of experience, and this kind of goes back to the example that I brought up, the clients that I had that had 10 years of work experience, they the one that's currently in a program and the kind of connections that the one that will be joining here in January, both of them felt like the interactions they had with other executive students were, I would say they were able to learn as much as they were able to give. And kind of what we came back to is if they were to join a full-time program, it was less of an age thing than an experience thing. The being able to gain knowledge from your cohort, in especially the one that's been at Booth now for a couple of years. He's really felt like he's been able to give and get through that process. So Don, I don't know if you've got anything else to add there.
Yeah, no, I think that first of all, because one of the trends in executive education is that it used to be it was heavily employee sponsored, and now there are far more people who are sort of sponsoring their own MBA while they're working. And because of that, business schools have responded a little bit in terms of changing their programming. It used to be that, when the employer was paying the bill, they did not want their students to be getting any job advice or career. So it used to be like you couldn't use the Career Management Center. But quite a few programs now will allow you to use their regular Career Management Center even for the executive program, because they recognize a lot of people are paying for this themselves and they want to maybe make a transition after the MBA. I know from being a Kellogg alum, and I was just visiting there this summer, they actually, Kellogg MBAs can, for executive and weekend programs, they can use the Career Management Center so that they can actually even interview for some of the same jobs on campus if they are selected by the employers. There are some really, and if you're looking at executive programs or, not full-time programs, don't necessarily limit yourself either to a certain geography, because there are so many programs where they've also customized so that it might be, every 3 weeks you fly to. So if you live in a place, let's say you live in Atlanta and you have that good airport, you can get a direct flight to pretty much anywhere. If it's just once every 3 weeks, it's not quite as, it makes it potentially an option. There are some interesting things, like Wharton has an executive MBA program where you can do it in San Francisco. So anyway, I think there's just growing by the day, lots of different options, and I think there's lots of good things about all of them.
Yeah, and example, my client starting at Kellogg is actually starting in the Kellogg Miami program in January.
Yeah, right.
So yeah. Next question was, how does the Canadian MBA differ from the US MBA process, if at all? Donna, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I'll answer. Yeah, I actually have, like I said, I visited Rotman. I have quite a few clients that are looking, and quite a few international clients are looking more at Canadian programs. For the most part, some of them are, there's just like there is in the US, but there might be a few more one-year options. But in terms of the actual application process, it's pretty similar. It's, it's the same kind of thing. And I will say this is sort of a little insight. I'm assuming most people on this call are US applicants, but I think Rotman could be, and several of the Canadian schools, Ivy, Schulich, McGill, which I know has a Kappa Gamma, near and dear to Kappas. But there are some great programs there, and a lot of the employers are big multinational companies. And I think that as a U.S. person, if you wanted to have kind of international light, if you will, experience, or you want to have this international program, you go to an MBA program in Canada, you get that. And in a lot of cases, you could be getting hired with the same multinational companies that are recruiting in the U.S. And, it's no trouble for you to then be able to get work in the U.S. So that's sort of something that maybe people haven't thought about. But I was really, really impressed when I went to Toronto and visited Rotman this summer.
That's great. Last question is about financial aid. And are there ways to ask for financial aid after kind of being accepted if you weren't offered financial aid?
So you want me to take that real quick?
Yeah,
with
that'd be
my
great.
admissions background? Yeah, just so by and large, first of all, the biggest chunk of money in MBA, getting funding is in full-time MBA. Very rare in online, part-time, executive for getting any kind of, a little bit, there's some of this, but for the most part, if you want like you're trying to get a full ride somewhere, you're more likely to find that in the full-time option. Generally speaking, programs will be looking and evaluating fellowships as part of the application process. So the top, 5% of their applicant pool they're targeting. And also sometimes, specific, they might have specific recruitment goals, like they want to have more URMs or they want to have more women or whatever. And so, you may get something more because of you're in some kind of recruitment package that's important to the school. If you haven't been offered one, generally speaking, just asking for it, it's not, doesn't yield all that much help. Sometimes if you have, and this is where it's helpful to maybe apply to a wide variety of schools, but if you have, for example, a similar peer institution. So for example, if you were at Kellogg and you have an offer and you had an offer from Booth and you really wanted to go to Kellogg, but Booth gave you a little bit more, you might be able to, not so much from a negotiate, like telling the school, admissions people do not like someone saying, it's not like shopping for a car where it's like, well, I got this deal here. What can you do for me? They don't necessarily like that, but more from here's my problem. I really want to go to Kellogg, and I would love if I had the opportunity to, have that same amount of funding. And more like, here's my problem. Is there any way you can help me? And sometimes the schools can, and sometimes if you are very nice and polite through the process. I also have seen people where you wouldn't think this would happen, but it does, where they say yes, they deposit, they're going to go, but the school knows, hey, this person was kind of asking for a little bit more money and we didn't have it now, but maybe, a month later, they had some money free up because someone that they had offered money to decided to go somewhere else. And they may, in fact, up your offer a little bit. But so it's more like, be very polite and nice, and let people know kind of what your problem is or what your situation is. And then, sometimes you'd be surprised, but certainly approaching it from, I want this, or even going to like Kellogg and saying, well, I got a full ride at, my local school. That's not really if it's not a peer institution, if that MBA program doesn't perceive that money offer to be a peer institution to them, it's not really that compelling to them. So those are some things to keep in mind.
Okay, we've got a couple others that have popped up here. One is how much do admissions team look at the other schools that you've listed that you've applied to?
I think it's funny. I think for them, and I can speak from my own experience as an admissions person. I mean, I think they like to see maybe that, that this person maybe for what they want to do, it makes sense. So you should probably try to have, schools, for example, someone applies to Kellogg, wouldn't be surprising that they would also apply to Ross, or that they might also apply to Fuqua or Haas, for example, because I think there's some similarities there. So, I think it's okay to put a couple that are like, make sense, but for the most part, this is not really, it's more just for their kind of marketing and knowledge and sort of insight, but it doesn't really, I've not seen it materially affect an admissions decision. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
All right. Great. Sorry, there's one more here. What's the difference of a full-time or part-time program based on the job type and salary after completion?
So I would say in terms of transformation, but let me, just more to the question. No, go ahead. Yeah, and I'll let you answer this too, but it's basically, I mean, the biggest transformations are coming out of the full-time 2-year MBA program in terms of people, coming in as, communications consultant and coming out as a, investment banker. Those kinds of transformations happen most easily in a full-time 2-year program. That being said, they also can happen in part-time and executive programs as well. So that's my take. I don't know if you have anything else to say there.
Yeah, I would say part-time programs and executive programs are expecting you to be employed during their program.
Yes.
And so something to think about in the application process is, your goals and kind of short and long-term goals within the application process. You can, I would say you could talk about pivoting, but talking about a wholesale change would be difficult to do within their program. Again, not to say that you can't do it, but I think as you're thinking through kind of your strategy for applying, you might want to think through what are some of the pivots that you can make that would allow you to leverage with that school. And then, personally, you could really investigate whether or not you can pivot further or not. But you want to be careful not to indicate that you are coming to a part-time program or executive program and then kind of like, leave your job and look for another job. So that might be a red flag for an application. Let's see. And I think that looks like that's about it.
Okay, good. Well, I know. So I don't know if that comes back up. Yeah, I was just thinking. Yeah, we appreciate it. Hopefully, it's been helpful to everybody. Certainly, we wish everyone the best going through this. I can empathize, and it can be stressful, but I think you have to just take it one step at a time and gather information, and don't think about the end. Just kind of think about, what do I need to do today to get more information, to get closer to being ready to apply and go.
So good luck to everybody, and keep up with it. Sometimes it's tough to keep going, but if it's a goal, then I wish you the best of luck and to get through it.
Thank you so
All right.
much, Donna and Melissa, for leading our session tonight. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening for your participation. Your questions were wonderful. If you have any comments about today's topic, or if you have any questions, you're welcome to email education@kkg.org, and they can help direct those questions for you. As we close the webinar, there will be a survey that pops up. If you would please just take a moment to answer those questions. Your feedback helps us shape future webinar events. Thank you so much, ladies, for a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again at another one of our lifestyle webinars.